Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Would like to thank everybody for having me present our flag, my flag collection to you all. As you can see, I have a variety of very unusual flags here. Most people ask me if I'm a flag collector, and I really say I'm not. I collect American artwork at its best. I have a few things I'd like to cover before I get started on my flags. It's sort of hard to be surrounded by this beautiful red, white, and blue without also starting with a Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd be so kind, may I ask everybody to stand up and join me in our Pledge of Allegiance. You can pick what direction to look. You can't go wrong. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. I have two other quick things to cover first. One is a safety message, and the safety message is really for me. During my talk, I'm going to be opening up some flags, and some of the times I will be putting them on a table. Some might even hit the floor. So as a safety measure, I thank you gentlemen for not jumping up and punching me out if the flag happens to hit the floor. Secondly, there's always a lot of questions. You're going to see some flags that you're going to immediately say, the flag doesn't look like that, and there's a lot of why. I will be going through my speech, and at the end I will have time for a question and answer. And I invite you all to think of anything you would like, and I'd be happy to stay as long as I can, answer any questions about our flag. I also am an advocate of American history, and it's pretty hard to look at all these flags and not also try to relate it to American history. So I'm going to delve into American history first for a few minutes and then tie into our flags. So most people, I'm going to ask about America's birthday. Now, a lot of people will think of America's birthday and they will say July 4th, 1776. Some other people will say July 3rd, and there'll be another group that'll say July 2nd. But around that period of time, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, can I have a show of hands? Does everybody who agrees with that those few days could be viewed as being America's birthday? You guys, generally speaking, agree with that? I think majority do. Okay, now I'm going to sort of disprove that theory. Are there any faculty members here? Are you married by any chance, sir? 45 years. Great. May I ask you, what was your wedding date?
September 17, 1970.
What was your engagement date? Okay. Okay. That's a very typical answer, the way it usually comes about. Most people will not remember their engagement date, but they will remember their wedding date. Now, liken that to American history to the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is actually a very whiny document. If you were to read that, it basically is, King George, you're bad, you're a meanie, we don't like you, we're leaving. It's a whiny document. Very important because it got us on the path to where we are today. But liken that a little bit to the engagement. You really don't, the engagement in many ways doesn't mean anything until you accomplish what you plan on doing. The wedding date is a far more important date. Does anybody know what the wedding date of our independence was? Because if you got engaged, using that as an example, of July 4th, we actually won the war, and that was the Treaty of Paris, and that was September 3rd, 1783. So think of it again as far as a marriage. The more important date is when we won the war. So in fact, our country is actually 7 years younger than our government says it is, because we are looking at July 4th, 1776, when in really it should be in 1783. So we wind up now becoming independent. For the first time, we truly are the United States of America. We ran under the Articles of Confederation for another 5-6 years. And technically, we were the United States of America, but really, we were 13 independent countries united as the United States of America. Every state was run as almost an independent country. We had 7 navies. And it wasn't until we developed the Constitution that we really created the country as we know it today. During the Articles of Confederation period of time, many people were out looking for a king to come in and run our country, because we didn't know any concept of, it was never done before, how we could manage a country without a royal person running it. So we developed the Constitution. A far more important date would be September 17th, 1787. That was the date when we actually created the Constitution. Next important date, and there actually are 5 important dates that I would consider for our birthday: the Declaration of Independence, winning of the war, the writing of the Constitution. The Constitution didn't kick into gear until we had a majority of the states ratifying it. New Hampshire did in November 1788. So then the Constitution kicked in, and we wound up going out looking for a president. George Washington became president. He was sworn in April 30th, 1789. Now, this is sort of a background of history because it's very important. We have the longest running government in the world. Now, think about that. A lot of people will turn around and they'll say, whoa, wait, back that up. The longest running government in the world. People say, well, France, that's really long. Well, I'm not talking about the dirt. But in France, Napoleon was running around Europe 25 years after we became independent. Whoa. What about England? England is real old too. Well, King George III was running England and America before, during, and he was running England after we got our independence, and there were many other monarchs after King George III, but the Queen has 1 vote now. How about Russia? Well, the Bolsheviks didn't do too well in the early 1900s over there, and they've changed their government. Italy, they've changed their government over 20 times just since, I think, 1950. You go through Japan, emperor has 1 vote. The Vatican was created in 1929. There's only one other country older than America, and that is a country called San Marino. It's in Italy. It's about 3 square miles, and it does not even have a street light. They were created in 1610. Other than that, America has the longest running government in the world, and it's because of our Constitution. So when you hear people say, change the Constitution, we've had amendments, we've got plenty of amendments, but we are a country of laws, and as soon as we start forgetting our roots, we will go the way of many other dynasties that were great and then eventually failed. So our Constitution, when you look at those 5 dates that I said, Declaration of Independence, Treaty of Paris, writing of the Constitution, New Hampshire's critical moment in enacting the Constitution, and then the George Washington, there's 5. I'd put July 4th as the least important of those 5 important dates. But who's going to fight momentum? Momentum is July 4th, so we're going to stick with July 4th. Okay, now into some of my flags. I'm going to take you back to prior to the Revolutionary War. We had 13 colonies here, and everybody was getting a bit tired of the difficult rule of England. And within each one of the colonies, you had people who wanted to stay loyal to King George and Great Britain. You had a lot of people who wanted to go. Some people were in between. Well, they didn't have the internet, we didn't have phones, and we didn't have all that other stuff. So a flag was always a great means of communicating my opinions. Remember the capture the flag game that we all played younger? You got the flag, basically you won. A flag was a great means of communicating one's belief. So before the Revolutionary War, in each one of the colonies, you had a lot of people, again, wanting to, don't know where we're going, but I'd like to be independent. Some other people wanted to stay loyal. And then there were people in between. So a number of flags, and I brought a couple representative samples to show you what I mean. There were many, many different flags that were designed, but here is that right? Here's one. They called this the pine tree flag, And basically, this was a symbol of independence. It was a symbol of peace. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the South felt that this represented a lot of the interest of people in New England more than them. So this one did not get a whole bunch of favoritism on all the states. This was another popular one. Sort of interesting because it has the crescent moon that has since become quite popular on part of the flag of South Carolina. But this was another rallying flag that came out. Again, it was popular and it was continuing the message, but this was one of maybe 20 or 30 different versions of this. You also had, don't ask me why, but you had some with snakes on it. This isn't the first one. We got this one out. There were 3 flags with snakes on it. This is not the first one either, but this one actually was Benjamin Franklin took this symbol of the snake, and there's one I'll show you in a minute that was a whole snake. And this was a little bit, I guess this might have been the first level of the Tea Party, when you start having a snake and like, don't mess with me. Independence. Benjamin Franklin in his Poor Richard's Almanac showed the snake cut into 13 pieces, basically saying, not only drawing upon the attitude of we are going to be independent, we can do it, but we actually we are not as strong if we are apart as we are when we are all unified. There were 3 versions of the snake flag. Here's another one. This was actually around the same time. This one has been recycled as being more popular with some of the latest political movements. But then, as we got closer to our independence, oh, here I did have the 3rd one. It was hiding in there. Now, enlightened countries don't have snakes on their flags. So this was not something that was really designed for, I think, the long term. This was more like get this movement started. But then a flag came out, and this is a very, very important flag. This is called the Continental Colors or the Grand Union flag. It has alternating red and white stripes, 13, and it has what they call the British Union Jack up on the upper left-hand side. This is called the place of honor, the upper left-hand side. And this is the double cross of St. George and St. Andrew. It only has 2 on here because Ireland, St. Patrick, was not added to it yet. But if we had a peaceful transition from Great Britain, this is what our flag would look like today. There's only one that has survived. I had it for about 20 years and I sold it to a friend of mine. But this is the mother of Betsy Ross's flag. And again, if we had a peaceful transition, this is what our flag would look like today. Now, the war breaks out. I'm going to come back to this one in a minute. The war breaks out, and a year after the Revolutionary War starts, a guy named Francis Hopkinson goes to the Continental Congress. They're busy running the war. He goes to them and he says, this is really nuts. We've got a real problem. We're fighting the most powerful country in the world. They've got uniforms and they got guns. They've even got helmets. They got fancy this. They got fancy that. They even have food. We don't have food. Shoes. They even have a flag. We don't even have one. Let's get a flag. So the Continental Congress is busy. They say, great, go get us a flag. So he runs out and he takes this flag and he goes to Betsy Ross and he says, take that British thing off and put a blue field and white stars in there. And he runs back to the Continental Congress. Now, there's always a question about Betsy Ross. Did she or did she not make our first flag? Well, we do know that Francis Hopkinson was charged with the mission to getting a flag. We do know that he wound up going over to Betsy Ross. We do know that he came back sometime later on with a flag, and we did get a bill from Betsy Ross. So connect those dots, I guess, is a pretty good thing that Betsy Ross did it. So he goes and he says, takes this thing, British thing off, put a blue field and white stars, which he does. Now, I wasn't there at the time, but rumor has it that she said, well, here's the price. How much is it going to cost? How much is the price? He says, oh, that's too expensive. You can't do that. Can you make it a little less expensive? He was already doing value engineering back in the 1700s. So she says, well, I could do the flag with 5 pointed stars. He said, well, how's that going to change the price? Simple. She takes a piece of material, she folds it 2 or 3 ways, one snip, opens it up, it's a perfect 5-pointed star. Now, I've tried that a couple times, and I've cut my finger every time. I can't do it. But it's very simple to go do that, and that's sort of an important point about how and why we got a 5-pointed star. Because a 5-pointed star is not really a star. It's called a spur or a row. A 5 or a 4 point is called a spur or a row. And a spur or row is down on your feet, down on the ground. It's satonic. A star has 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points to it. So we wound up with this flag, and he comes back to the Continental Congress, and he says, here is the flag. And this is one of the more important designs of a 13-star flag. They say, great, mark it down. So with this flag, we have our first flag resolution. The first flag resolution basically says, the flag of these United States shall consist of 13 alternating red and white stripes and a blue field and white stars to represent a new constellation. Do you see anything in here about the dimensions? Do you see anything about how many points are on the stars? Do you see about a layout? You see nothing about that. But they went, thank you very much, get it done, we got a war to run, get out of here. So our first flag resolution was June 14, 1777, a year after we started the war. So here is our first flag resolution. Now what we do, this is written up and it's sent around, not very quickly, but it's sent around to the other colonies. And they in turn say 13 alternating red and white stripes, blue field, white stars to represent a new constellation. Whoops, wait a minute, that's the Bennington one. They make this flag. This is called the Easton flag. This was made actually in Easton, Pennsylvania, and it became a very, very famous and important flag. But it is exactly what the first flag resolution says. 13 alternating red and white stripes, blue field, white stars represent a new constellation. But look at it. You got 7 points to the stars. This flag still exists. It's in a museum. But this is what they call it's bass backwards, as far as what we know. Well, finally, some pictures and some graphics came in, but there still was no change to the flag resolution. I'll put that one up in here. So now what we do is that we have a flag. It's described. We don't know if the original Betsy Ross flag had the stars in a circle, 2-3-2-3 pattern, 4-5-4. We don't know. That flag went poof. So we win our independence. We now are, George Washington is president. I'll digress for 1 second. George Washington, I hate to ruin somebody's history lesson, but George Washington was our 9th president. George Washington was not our first president. The first president was when we won the war, and there was a guy named John Hanson. John Hanson became president of the United States of America when he was president of the Continental Congress, and when we won with the Treaty of Paris, he became the first president. George Washington was actually our 9th president. Now, he was a very important 9th president because then the country had really kicked into gear. But there was a lot of comment that the red and white stripes originated from George Washington's family coat of arms. It was silver and red stripes or white and red stripes. And that is what most people are saying are the genesis of the red and white stripes. So now we have a country, we got our flag, even though it's ambiguous what it is. Vermont decides they want to join the Union. So Vermont comes into the Union and they become our 14th state. As they become our 14th state, this flag over here is one of only 2 14-star flags in existence. This is all made out of what they call linsey-woolsey. Linsey-woolsey is a combination of linen and wool, but there are only 2 14-star flags that I know of, this one and another one, that have survived from 1791. But it's also interesting because there are 13 stripes and 13 stars. No sooner did Vermont come in, actually some of the flags had 14 stripes because they felt that they were, if they're going to be a full member of the Union, they are deserving of a stripe and a star. So some of those flags had 14 stripes and 14. This one actually came from Andrew Jackson's family tree that has 13 stripes and 14 stars. A year later on, Kentucky joins the Union in 1792, and they now have 15 stars. And what do? Some flags had 13 stripes, some had 15 stripes. If you look at the flag, the Francis Scott Key flag, that has 15 stars on it. It's 15 stars, 15 stripes. And I'll digress for 1 second. At Fort McHenry, when Francis Scott Key wrote that thing, his great poem, the flag that is in the Smithsonian is the Francis Scott Key flag from Fort McHenry, is 42 feet by 64 feet long of heavy wool on a flagpole. Not a chance that thing was flying like he said. Cool, misty, damp, heavy wool. It was, boom, it was right on that flagpole. In fact, that was not the one that flew because the flagpole wasn't even that high. But you would have needed a major hurricane to have gotten on a dry day to get that thing going out. They had a second flag that was about 9 feet by 18 feet. And that's the one that Francis Scott Key saw. The big one that they had, actually when the Commandant of Fort McHenry, when he passed away shortly afterwards, his wife took the flag and she started ripping the flag, and every member of that garrison got a piece of the flag. Then every time they got married, they got a piece of it. Every time they had a child, every time somebody had a birthday, they got a flag. So now the flag down in the Smithsonian is 42 feet by 42 feet. There's 42 feet by 20 feet of that original flag missing. And they're trying to, you see some of them on eBay, most of them aren't correct, but a big chunk of those flags that went. Anyway, we now have flags that are really confusing because a lot of other states are trying to join the Union, and if you start adding more states, that flag's going to get way out of proportion with all the stripes. So suddenly we're going to have a flag like this, or you're going to make them real small. It's going to be a seamstress nightmare trying to figure out how to do it. So they solved the problem by coming up with the second flag resolution. And the second flag resolution basically did a couple things. What it said is that only the number of states in the Union as of July 4th will be honored as being official flags. The government didn't have any money, so the government wasn't going to be making a whole bunch of flags every time a state came in. So what the government said is that they might, 2 or 3 might come in during a year. Forget it. So we're only going to honor July 4th as the date that we have. The second thing we're going to be doing is the flag, we're going to stay at 13 stripes to honor the original 13. Plenty of room in the blue field for other states to come in. So that was basically the second flag resolution in the early 1800s. I think it was 1809 or something like that, that came in. So that was all it did. It still didn't say anything about the stars, the layout, the pattern. It didn't say anything about anything else about the design. It wasn't finally resolved until the third flag resolution, and the third flag resolution didn't come about until 1912. And that took all the fun out of the flag. That took all the artistry out of the flag because it dictated the number of points, the stars, the layout, the size, the dimensions, everything. It truly became a flag. Now, what I've done over the years of collecting, people ask me, do you collect flags? I don't. I collect American artwork at its best because I can look at all these flags and I can pretty much tell you where each of them came from, even though they can't speak. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to walk through and I'm going to introduce you all to some of my interesting flags. I'll start with this one over here. Actually, everybody that has a $1 bill in their pocket, why don't you take out the $1 bill and turn it to the back side? I got something to show you. Remember that first flag resolution said, the flag of these United States shall consist of 13 alternating red and white stripes, okay? When a flag is flying, you want to see the contrast with the sky. So you want to have dark at the top and dark at the bottom. But if you look on the back of your $1 bill, you'll see a little shield. You'll see a little circle, and then it will be a shield. And it'll be a shield like this. But what you also see, it's white to white. It is not red to red. Our own currency is wrong. Now that error has continued on a lot of things because they basically took artistic license and they said, well, if we have the white to white here, we have to basically have an outline if it's on something like this. Yeah, duh, go ahead and do it. It's our flag. Can you imagine Coca-Cola saying, change the swirl? You don't change, it's our flag. Artistic license they took. Okay, this piece, George Washington, our 9th president, was sworn in up at Federal Hall in New York City on April 30th, 1789. It was on the balcony of the second floor balcony, and above it there was a pie-shaped relief. And they had covered that with material, and on either side there was a big eagle, and right smack dab in the middle there was a shield, this shield. If this could talk, this exact flag right here, if this could talk, it would have looked down and would have seen not only George Washington, all of our founding fathers. There's only one of those. Pretty neat. So we have a 14-star flag over there, which represented Vermont. Actually, there's probably only, and I don't know this, but I'm guessing there probably is only 24 flags, maybe 24 flags from the 1700s that have survived. There's 3 of them here. That's from 1789. We've got a 1791. And this one here, very unusual, this is a 16-star flag. There are about 4 16-star flags that have survived. Tennessee was our 16th state, but look at it, there's 6-point stars on that. I think it's beautiful because the red has faded with the sunlight, but there are 6-point stars on there. Most people would say, well, you've got the Star of David on that. I don't think Israel was around back then, was it? I don't know, 1795. This, again, I can look at some of this and I could say that probably came from Germany. It probably came because the flag maker would look and he would say, I know exactly what I want to do because that's a star and the other ones were not. But, so what I've done with a lot of my flags, some of them, as you can see, are framed entirely. A lot of other ones are folded up because I want to highlight the most important part. The canton, if you've seen some of the red and white stripes, you pretty much have seen it all. Now, I'm a little bit upside down, so I apologize. Let's see. I'm not going to go in any order of age, but I will, and if anybody wanted to stand up and see some of these, this is a very interesting piece here. This is called a Great Star Pattern. And I have a couple examples of statehood. There's a double oval over there, double medallion over there. Look at the stars on this one. But what happens when a state came into the Union, joined the Union, the state would come in, and let's just say the 34th state would join the Union. The other 33 states made new flags. They would put all the stars in a straight row, keep it as simple as possible as they possibly could. But the unwritten rule was that the state entering the Union could do whatever they wanted. They could do whatever they wanted. And since it was their time in the limelight, they became spiffy. So when I see something like this, this is just not a 35-star flag of the 35 states. Who knows where it came from? Could have come from Pennsylvania. I know for a fact this came from West Virginia because they were the only ones that basically had the right to go do something fancy. Now here's another question, speaking about West Virginia. We have a North Dakota, South Dakota, we have a North Carolina, South Carolina, we have a West Virginia, and we have, where's East Virginia? Anybody know why we have a West Virginia, we don't have an East Virginia? Oh, come on. Okay. The Virginia seceded from the Union during the Civil War. A year or so goes by, and you had more of the aristocrats to the east, and you had more of the mountain people to the west. The west people go to the Union and they say, we want out of here. We don't want to go down the south. We want to stay as part of the Union. Union says, great, no problem at all. So they went and created West Virginia. The war ends. Virginia gives up. Okay, thank you very much. We want the other half of our state back. And they said, tough toenails, you're done. So that's how we have a West Virginia, not an East Virginia. It was interesting because Virginia seceded from the Union. West Virginia seceded from Virginia and wound up going back. So, okay, this one, if you can see, this is just gorgeous. Talk about the workmanship of this. If you can see that, you guys can stand up in the back. This big star in the middle represents North Dakota. North Dakota is our 39th state. You had a flip of the coin. Two states came in the same day, North Dakota and South Dakota. They flipped the coin. North Dakota came in at 10 o'clock in the morning, South Dakota at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This was the flag of America for 4 hours. But look at the workmanship. Look at the beauty. I mean, this is what I call American artwork at its best. I have another one over here. This one is a Civil War piece. It's interesting because it's resting on red. The blue canton is resting on the red. Afterwards, if somebody wanted to come up and you can see what this means, and I actually have some pamphlets here that will describe a lot of what I'm talking about, but the blue is resting on red. That's called the war stripe or the blood stripe. So when the nation is at war, they took the blue down to symbolize the blood is being shed at the time. Now I will look at some flags and I'll see that it's resting on red. And I count the stars, and there wasn't a war going on then. So we all know, we've heard about stamp collectors, that you get a stamp and it's upside down, you know, or the coin is stamped twice. And people like Ers actually become of a greater value than it being done correctly. So I'll look at the flags and I'll see it's resting on red, time of war. And you look at the number of stars and you say, there wasn't a war going on then. Well, it was either a mistake or they put more stars onto the flag because it's easier to put a few more stars on the flag than it is to make a whole new flag. Here's an example of that. Somebody slaves and slaves. They make a flag, a new flag. Her husband comes home, says, I got a new flag, honey. She says, great. Problem is there's 2 more states in the Union. It's already obsolete. Can you see the 2 odd stars that are on this thing? So all they did was just recycle the same flag. So sometimes I will look at a flag and I'll say, that's not the right date. That's not the right date for one other reason. So in fact, this is, I think, 44 stars. In fact, it's a 42. I forgot how many on here. In fact, it was started out as a 42 it became a 44-star flag. I'll digress for a second. Also, I was at a place in Philadelphia not that long ago, and I looked at a flag, and I think it had 27 stars on it. And I looked at it, and it wasn't correct because it had metal grommets on the hoist. And I looked at the metal grommets, I said, well, they didn't have metal grommets. 27 stars means that it's from about 1830. But I look at this thing, and here you had metal grommets. They didn't have metal grommets until the 1860s. And I realized what it was. It's called what they call an exclusionary flag. An exclusionary flag was during the Civil War, we were fighting to keep the other part of our Union with the North, so we would all be united. Some people said they wouldn't let them go. So we had 33 stars starting at the Civil War. 2 states would go, 2 more states would go, 2 more states would go. And eventually there were a number of states that seceded. Some people took the stars off of the Union flag. So they basically said, let them go and take your stars with you. Goodbye, good riddance. President Lincoln went nuts over that, but that was a big movement. And I look at these flags again, and I can sometimes tell when they're either younger or older than they appear by some clues with that. I'll take another side turn. During the Civil War, you remember the Civil War flag. There were actually 4 of them, but the Civil War flag has that rebel X. How many stars are on that Civil War flag, the rebel X? Confederate flag.
13.
How many Confederate states were there? Well, even just brave enough to raise your hands. Here's something for you. Come on up. There were 11. There. Whoops. I'm sorry. Good. There. He was sleepwalking. Okay. There were only 11 Confederate states. With 11 Confederate states, why do they have 13 stars on the Confederate flag? There were 2 stars awarded because the states represented a lot of sympathy to the Confederate cause. It was Missouri and Kentucky. So Missouri and Kentucky had stars on the Union flag. They had stars on the Confederate flag. All right. Let me go back through my introduction of introducing of some of my flags. Where am I? So this is a Civil War piece. This is I think 37 stars. 37 stars. Very unusual. It's a boxed square. I thought that's very unusual. You don't see that pattern. This is a double medallion. Beautiful. I started collecting double medallions, double ovals, I'm sorry, with 2 points in it, and I started a whole nother collection. I thought, what am I doing? You know, with a whole nother collection. This is an interesting flag that I like very much. I don't know if you can see it with the light glare, but this is another Civil War piece. And this, what they call basically a starry pattern. It's a starry pattern because all the stars are different sizes. They're doing what they call dancing. They're dancing and that they're twisting and they're turning and they're all over. So this shows an awful lot of pride. Beautifully executed, beautifully made flag. Again, another Civil War piece, not unlike this. This was another thing that you would do. You would have a cane and you would be able to parade. And this was most likely First World War era. And you could go like this. This is another one of the mistakes that I said that most people would look at and they would say, this one's all wrong. Not interested. From a flag collector's viewpoint, this is outstanding. This has 12 stripes. It has 12 stripes, starts with white, rests on red, and the canton is on the upper right-hand side, backwards. But if you look on the other side, there's no stars on the other side. So this was basically a one-sided flag, and it was actually meant to be displayed this way. It's called a judicial flag because it was meant to be displayed vertically. They didn't even bother putting stars on the other side. This is from the early 1800s. I have no idea. I have no idea why the flag maker made the flag this way. But from a flag collector's viewpoint, there not only is this a beautiful flag, but there's everything wrong with it, which is, again, great, beautiful. I think I've gone through most of my flags. I have got a couple other ones. This was right after the Revolutionary War. It's called the Bennington flag. Became a very famous one. They were trying to make this into the American flag as opposed to, they were trying to formalize this one into the flag. Very important. Interesting, it's got white to white. This one is also backwards, but it's got 8-point stars to it. This was a beautiful one. I'm working with a group now trying to design a flag for our 225th birthday, 250th birthday, sesquicentennial. Say that 10 times real fast. But it's going to be a new flag that they're trying to propose that would actually have 250 in stars. It would be 1776 and 250 all in stars. Don't know how that's going to come about. After the third flag resolution, it's very hard to find handmade flags. I brought this one because I thought this one is folksy. It actually is quite new. Let me get this thing off. It's a 48-star flag. But look how unusual that is with the canton the way it is. Instead of 6 rows of 8, it's got 8 rows of 6. So I would typically not bother with a 48-star flag because I get all the time people say, I've got a really old flag, really old flag. I said, really? Gee, I got a really old flag. Really, this is very valuable, very old. Again, nobody beat me up in here. We got a really old flag. I said, well, let's start with the number of stars. 50 stars. I said, okay, thank you, forget it. But a 48-star flag I wouldn't be overly interested in, other than I had to be tempted for that one because it was so hand-done and so unusual. I have another one that's quite fragile. And you might see, and this is what sunlight does, but this one's beautiful. This is from the Indian Wars. As you can see, it's resting on red, but this was and is still a beautiful flag, real fat stars, Pillsbury Dough flag, stars. But look what the sun did to this. I had one flag that had the blue canton, and it was made of 3 pieces of blue. And they dyed them blue, and they put all the stars on it. There was about 20 stars on this flag. And it was 3/4 this way, and a bigger piece here, and a small piece over here, all blue. But there were different materials. It was all exactly the same blue. But the sunlight kept, the material kept the blue on one piece. It turned gray on another, and it turned almost white on another one. And you're like, why would they make the blue canton with 3 different colors? It's what the sun did. So what I have to do is keep these flags all under special UV non-acidic paper backing, plexiglass, and as much out of the sun as possible. And the only reason these flags have really survived is because they were kept in a drawer someplace. When you think of an antique, something gets old, until finally when it gets so old, it starts returning in value and it starts becoming an antique and increasing. The only reason these things survived is they were stuck in a drawer and somebody didn't take it to make a dress or a wadding or a rag or something before it started returning in value. Again, we didn't have a flag police, and we didn't have the revered impression about our flag until the early 1900s. I had a collection, I sold it, I had a collection of flag napkins that came from the White House. So you would have dinner at the White House from the 1940s up to about the 1840s up to about the 1880s. You would go to the White House, and if you were all fortunate enough to go there and have dinner there, and your napkin would be a flag. So you're going like this with the flag. Today you really would get beaten up, on doing it. But that was not unusual at the time. It was a flag. We had 13 stars started out. We have 50 now. We actually have 37 different versions of our flag. In fact, there are only 25 versions of our flag, because what I said before, that the government stopped making flags multiple times during the years. So we have 37 different versions, but you also have only 25 official ones. That means you didn't make them, but they weren't necessarily official. What I've attempted to do is collect a lot of the artwork versions from each state, or from many of the states that come in, and this is only part of what I either do have or did have.
I'm curious how frequently you make your presentation. This is a wonderful program today.
Less and less. These things shouldn't be moved, and it's they shouldn't be moved. But how could I resist coming out to this wonderful facility at Williamson? So they dragged me out of town. Thank you, thank you. Professor Rounds, could I steal you for a second? Is it okay if I embarrass him a little bit? You guys mind? All right. How many stars were on the flag when Williamson was founded?
Okay, so
Do 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 do. Doom da doom 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 doom.
35.
Everybody agree with that? Good. You're all wrong. You're all wrong. Could you hold that side of it? This is a 38-star flag. This flag is representative of the very flag that would have proudly flown over Williamson when it was founded in 1888. This is my present to you. Congratulations. So, thank you for having me. Thank you,
awesome
great.
archive.
Good.